Hey everybody. So, as promised, we're going to be talking about addiction, many different types of addiction, and how hypnosis can help with that. And so, what I mean by many different types of addiction, of course, we have the classic kind that people are aware of, like the hard drugs, alcohol, things like that. But then there are many other forms that addiction can take. So, for example, if you're in a bad relationship and you know that union is something that is not good for you and probably also isn't even good for the other person, it can still be something that you are drawn to over and over again. So, we'll be talking about things like that as well as how hypnosis can help with all forms of addiction. So, Aaron, I have a question for you. I know you're going to be asking the majority of the questions. Have you ever known anyone who's had any form of addiction? Could be, food addiction, could be the harder things, could be video games. Like, have you experienced? I think we all have to some degree about certain topics. Have you experienced anything like that personally?
Um, I definitely know people that have. I have. I guess you could say, even now to a degree, I have a thing for food. Um, I used to be in the 300-pound range
Oh, really? How
at
much
one
are well,
time.
if I ask anything personal, just tell me. I
No,
think
that's
that fitness is really interesting, so I get probably maybe a little too intellectual about it. So if I'm being insensitive, just tell me. But like if you were in the 300 range, where are you now?
um probably 170.
That's amazing. Okay, this I think is going to help a lot of people. How did you start that positive shift in releasing that weight? What was the thing
It,
that was the turning point for you?
well, for me it was understanding diet and how the foods that I was eating impacted me.
Mhm.
So there's a book by Dick Gregory, Mother Nature's Guide to Good Old Home Cooking, and that book, in the black community, there's certain things that we grew up on, and certain things that a lot of us still eat, and our grandmothers definitely eat it. Some of the younger folks are getting out of some of those things,
Mhm.
but when I read that book, it basically explained in detail what those things were doing to a person's body and how bad it was for your body.
Mhm.
And literally after reading that book, I I cut out um, pork. I cut out a lot of the unhealthy foods, and I and the bad part was I went on to a complex carbohydrate diet, which I'm glad I lived to survive it. But
Why did you end up switching into a different unhealthy diet?
because I wanted to lose the weight, and going on the diet that I went on was unhealthy. I just did it myself. I was in the, I left when I was in 11th grade. I left for the at the end of the school year fat. I came back in September skinny.
Hold on. So you did this huge weight, and when you said that you were in the 300-pound range, you're talking about when you were a teenager?
Yes.
And oh my God, that's
So
amazing that as a
now
teenager you were able to exercise that much self-control.
it was because and I really started this before the school year ended, but I was just getting it rolling at that time.
Mhm.
So basically, just seeing the impacts of diet on family members,
Mhm.
that was what was the big thing for me. I had a family member that was became diabetic. Um, I had other family members that were just unhealthy, and I knew it was because of their diets. So
Mhm.
I happened to read the book. Someone said, "Here, I'm done with this book. You want to read it?" And I looked at it at first. I said, "No," and then I read it, and it really impacted me and gave me the breakdown. And from that point, I said, "I have to stop this immediately." So I stopped those things immediately. And then I said, I need to get the weight off. So
Mhm.
I literally, I had seen something about complex carbohydrates, and I knew that carbohydrates didn't stay with you. And
Speak for yourself.
depending on how you eat them,
Okay.
and also diet, whatever diet you're on, to do a true diet, you really have to do the blood panel for what your body actually needs, because there are some people, high fat foods is what they need to diet. It's not common, but I've seen people who went on a diet where they ate high fat foods because that's
Yeah.
what their body required for them to actually lose the weight.
I agree with that 100%. We are all really, really different. And so can you
Mhm.
speak a little bit more about what the blood panel is like would you go to a primary care physician and ask for this, or do you need to go to a dietitian? Like how would people go about getting this blood work done?
it's it's something that you typically would go through. Uh, well, your primary and a dietitian
Mhm.
would be the source. I don't recall the name of the test, um, but it's some type of blood panel where they do a full breakdown for what type of diet that you actually need to have. Because the there's some people that can't be vegan. I think
Right.
it's, don't hold me to it, but I think people with O are not supposed to be vegan.
Whatever the
Um,
universal donor is, and again, don't hold me to this either, but yeah, so the husband, Charles, he is whatever the universal donor blood type is. And I am so pro vegan vegetarian, but that one I'm like, man, you maybe should have like a little bit more
uh,
protein in your diet. Yeah.
uh, so there's definitely blood types that require meat within their diet. So the
Mhm.
thing of everyone being of the and I'm plant based, but I don't push plant based because plant based isn't for everybody. And
Mhm.
even some people, even without the blood type, because of the experiences with their bodies still have a requirement for certain things that they may not necessarily be able to be vegan. So for me, I just learned about it. I No, and I emphasize also, just as far as diets and people going on diets, there's so many different types of diets out there. You have to do your research. I definitely recommend getting the blood panels done, but do your research before you get into a diet. I know someone that went on one diet and ended up in the hospital because the diet didn't agree with them. In fact, I know more than one person that ended up in the hospital from doing a diet that didn't agree with them, but it's an official diet that's well known,
Mhm.
but they just don't talk about the failures within those diets. Um, so I was seeing things like that, but for me, I learned that little bit of information, and I was in 11th grade. I was 16. So I didn't put any thought into it. I just know my parents were upset about it. I
About going
went
on a
on
diet or about losing that much weight that quickly?
about going on about the diet that I was on.
Mhm.
The losing weight quickly, of course, was bad and is never recommended. But it was actually, my goal was to lose the weight as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
So on this diet, basically, I I didn't eat any type of meat. I occasionally would eat some fish. Um, but most of the time, my meals either consisted of yogurt for breakfast, nuts for lunch, and in the evening, just some pasta or rice. And
Plain?
yes, no, nothing on it, just plain pasta, plain rice, no butter, no salt, no nothing.
Interesting.
So it wasn't it wasn't the most tasty diet to be on.
Well, I
And
wanna finish what you're saying, and I've got 2 things that I'm gonna bring up.
it's so I did that, but I also was working out along with being on that diet.
Mhm.
So I definitely was never a fitness nut. I'm still not a fitness nut. I probably would never be a fitness nut. But in fact, to be perfectly honest, when I used to run, I honestly hated every step of running. When I would run, when I would do a 1 mile run or a 2 mile run, I hated every single step.
And
I
this is
couldn't
part of
wait
what you were
until it ended.
doing. This is part of what you were doing in 11th grade, or is this something that you did later on as an adult?
That's something I started doing in that process.
Okay.
I was I was basically working out with by running, walking, weights. I honestly, looking back on it now, that was probably the whole process for my weight loss was probably unhealthy, and not an acceptable combination of things to do. In fact, you probably would say by today's standards, they probably would have said I had an eating disorder at that time. By today's standards, it probably would have been considered an eating disorder
Yeah, it
because
sounds like it
I
was very
did get to the
calorie
point.
restrictive.
I did want to get to the point where I wanted to be. I was really small, and I still wanted to be smaller. And I came to the realization, I think one day, as far as when I still wanted to be smaller, that the size pants that I was wearing, I said these this size is really a small size to be. So if I'm really trying to get smaller, I don't know what I'm looking at in myself. And I came to the conclusion that it was time to stop. And I mean, I did get pressure from family as well to stop. Um, but I mean, they never wanted me to continue with it at all. And from that point, when I did stop, I went back to eating some of I never went back to eating pork. I completely dropped pork 100%. I was never a chicken lover, so chicken I would eat on occasion when my mother made it. Um, I still ate red meat on occasion, but I lost my taste and desire for red meat over time. And literally one day I made, and my mother would buy just to make sure that I was eating meat. Uh, and my mother's an old Southern woman, so my mother's over 90. So the whole concept of not eating those things never sat right with her.
Mhm.
So her and my father would go out and buy filet mignons just to make sure that I ate
They're
beef.
like, "We're gonna bribe him with the good stuff."
Uh, and literally, I, I, it did keep me eating beef for the longest time because they were getting top quality steaks. And then one day I made a fillet, and I'm sitting there looking at it done in the pot, and I just said I don't want this. And
Because is it because of the connection to animals? Is it because of the connection to health? Was it because of something different?
it's well, I was always bothered by the concept of animals and how they're treated for food. Even as a child, before I went on this diet, I had read about how veal is produced and how the
Yeah.
calves are treated for veal. And after I read that information, I did not eat veal again after that
It's really
because
good that you're able to intellectualize something and then make it part of your life, and then that's that.
it's well, yeah, and I agree, but I think people thought it was strange, especially in my household. We were introduced. My father was a foodie, so I was eating things that a lot of kids never ate,
Mhm.
and because of how he was, I was exposed to things. So eating veal and just having him come home with veal one day and say, "This is what we're going to have for dinner," and my mother's happy and excited, and my response is, "I can't eat that." And
Yeah. Was food
I
a form of love in your household that they were showing how they loved you by giving you good foods?
I I think my parents wanted us to experience as many things as possible. So it wasn't just food. I was exposed to a lot of things and a lot of variable things that people don't necessarily expose their children to. So it fit for food. It fit for I had been, and it's definitely not common within the black community, but I had been to the opera. I had been to um, uh, classical music concerts, so jazz concerts. I had experienced so many different things. So I guess to a degree, my father's love language would be exposure to so many varied things within life.
Mhm. That's really
Um,
nice.
yeah, I it's great. It's really wonderful. Um, uh, so I think it's uh, the fact that the exposure was there was also part of how my parents attempted to do what they thought was best for me health wise in
Mhm.
presenting those things. The veal thing never became a debate beyond that. I think my parents knew me well enough and knew that I had a love of animals and just thought that it was such a horrible thing for how a calf is treated for veal. I'm pretty sure they probably deep down realized at some point this boy is going to become one of those vegan people. I mean, back then it was so frowned upon when I was a kid for someone to say that they were. I mean, it wasn't a popular term, but for someone to say that they didn't eat any type of animal product was just such an alien and ridiculous thought concept for life back then.
Yeah.
And you got to keep in mind, this is back in the '70s when I was going in this direction. It was in our it was in it was in the '70s as far as the veal was concerned. It was in 1980 when I started going down the food journey of giving up the things that I gave up. Becoming a vegetarian or pescatarian was just a step, and that step lasted. I mean, that step lasted for many, many years. Uh, I just became vegan 5 years ago,
Mhm.
so for a long time, I lived as a pescatarian. But again, watching a movie or a series of movies, I watched the movie What the Health, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with,
Uh-huh.
and then I watched Forks Over Knives,
Mhm.
and I the for What the Health, I was let's back up on the health aspect too. I was diabetic. I was borderline diabetic, so it was being treated by diet. So I was eating more of meats, or not meats, but more fish and more fat products like butters and things of that type. Milk, milk products, cheese, and honestly, cheese. I still miss cheese.
So this
Of
is interesting tying it to the whole addiction thing. They have
Yes,
discovered that cheese sets off
hmm
the same part of the brain as
yep,
the harder drugs, which is one
it
of the
does.
reasons I avoid it now. Because I'm like,
And,
if I'm going to be clean and sober, that includes you, cheese. So,
it, and that's the and honestly, the I eat vegan cheese, but vegan cheese does not give you the same rush
it does not.
that real cheese does. And even the best vegan cheeses, they still don't give you that punch from the attachment to those receptors that regular cheese does.
Well, they say that the reason that it is so potent is that there is an evolutionary reason that dairy is so good. And it's that you want your baby to crave nutrients from you, right? And so if you have created this mother's milk that is very, very enjoyable for that baby who's supposed to be having it, it makes sense that those chemicals are within milk. Now, then we end
But
up having it and we have the same type of reaction to it, even though it wasn't really designed evolutionarily for us, but we're still having
mhm.
that reaction.
Yeah, and the the thing that's odd is, and it still amazes me, just the whole concept of we we drink and you make use of cow's milk
Mhm.
across the board and think nothing of it,
It's weird.
and
It's definitely weird.
and no other animal, to my knowledge, no other animal drinks the milk of another animal.
Mhm.
Eh, Um, cats on occasion, but that's a fallacy as far as cats and milk. Cats don't. That's not a common thing with cats. That's only certain cats that will do that.
Well, yeah, and I
So,
wanna oh, go ahead, and then I'll mention something.
and I just want to tie in one other thing with the milk thing and us drinking cow's milk, goat's milk. The same, and I'm not. And people are going to think I'm crazy, but a person that breastfeeds, people find it disgusting that a person that breastfeeds would allow someone else to drink that milk,
Mm.
which
Like,
it's not
yeah,
a
yeah.
common thing, but it makes more sense to drink human breast milk than to drink cow's milk if you're going to drink milk.
I love that you're
It,
getting so logical that everyone's like, "He's not wrong." I'm gag reflexing, but he's not wrong.
uh, uh, and look, it's natural and it's what's made for the body. If you're going to drink what came out of a cow, why not drink what came out of a human? And I'm not saying go out and do it. That's between you
Well, it's
and
also for the
whoever's
babies.
pumped it.
Yeah, it's designed for babies. It's designed for a certain stage in life.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
that's all it's designed for. It's not designed. Breast milk. No milk is designed for adults. Human breast milk is designed for human babies. Cow milk is designed for baby cows.
So, Aaron, what
There's
is your blood type?
I don't even remember.
You don't
I,
know? Okay, that's really funny because for those who are logging on a few minutes after we started the conversation, we were talking about addiction, and I asked Aaron if he had experienced any addiction, whether in his family or personally. And he mentioned that when he was younger, he was heavy and addicted to food, and then started to pay attention to his diet more. And that's when we were discussing that different diets work drastically differently for different people. And he mentioned to get a blood panel to find out what type of diet will work best for you. But another thing that you can do just immediately is Google your blood type and then look up the blood type diet. And again, I'm not saying that's going to work 100% for every single person, but when I looked it up years ago after one of my hypnosis classmates recommended it to me to look that up, I looked at A negative, which is me. And what was funny is that I had already been doing the diet that is right for my blood type and tying all this back to hypnosis and just being very connected. Sometimes people like I was kind of startled when you said that you know not only one but two different people that have gone on a diet that ended up putting them in the hospital. And for me, I think, shouldn't people be more in tune with their bodies, right? Shouldn't people be more in tune with how they're feeling? And so that's another reason that hypnosis is really, really helpful, that it does help you get more in tune, far more sensitive, more dialed in to what helps you feel good and you're making a healthy good and you're making progress versus what feels neutral or a little off or maybe needs to be tweaked some. And so, yeah, guys, look up the blood type diet. And then for me, A negative, they basically ended up describing veganism. They said avoid animal products and dairy. And I'm like, so, like, they basically described all of it, but did not use the V word, which, of course, nobody wants to use the V word because it can be taboo because you think about, like, protesters that are far left or whatever. And so for me, I've always been a pretty relaxed, well, I'm vegetarian now, but I'm basically a vegan that eats hard-boiled eggs and kefir. I do have kefir. It does help my digestion a lot. And one of my hypnosis students, she recommended it and even gave me like the little bugs to put into the whole milk
you
so
make
that
your own?
Yeah, she gave it to me, and I trust her 1,000,000%. And that's the other thing. Guys, whenever you're taking advice from somebody regarding health, like also vibe in terms of like intuition, what's good for you, how are you feeling? Also vibe with the person or people that are offering the health advice. And so when she was saying, "Yeah, I do this thing with the kefir and these little," she calls them bugs, these little bugs that end up eating all of the lactose within
Hmm.
the milk. And then when you have it, it's really good for your digestion. And because digestion has been something that I've been working on for a while now, I thought, okay, well, if I can and I like fat. I want to eat fat. I'd rather be satiated through that than through a carb. Carbs, I'm going to get fat and be hungry. So, but then when it comes to fats like avocados and things like that, I do really, really well. Um, and so I thought, okay, I'm just going to get some whole milk and then put these little bugs in there and then also mix in a lot of other really healthy things like mix in fresh raspberries, fresh blueberries, chia seeds, like mix that in and let it sit for a little bit, sprinkle some raw nuts on top. So make it just sort of like this really fun thing where, yes, the kefir's there and it's helping, but it has all of these other high fiber, high nutrients things built in to it so that it's a proper meal. So you can look up the type of diet that's good for your blood type. And then also, again, really check in with your intuition and what feels good for you. So, for example, I was watching Diary of a CEO. I'm going to reference it basically every single discussion. And there was this woman on there. Just to tie it back to my student who gave that to me, she's super healthy. Like you look at her and she radiates health. It's actually Kelsey. It's Kelsey who's going to be on this. It's I don't want to call this a podcast because I don't know what it is, but she'll be joining us for next week's discussion. Um, and so you guys will get to see firsthand what I mean. Like Kelsey radiates health. And if she says that something is probably good for you, it probably is. And so, yeah, just trusting her and moving forward with that because she emanates health herself. Um, and then when it comes to trusting your own feelings, no matter how much of an expert somebody is, there was this really very well informed expert on women's health and how what we need to lose weight, to gain muscle mass, all of these different things, it's so dramatically different than what men need. And so she was saying to make sure that you're eating a certain type of protein in the morning before you work out and then within 30 minutes of working out. And even though I have locked in to what works best for me in terms of feeling good, looking good, dropping weight, maintaining weight, I know my system. I went ahead and I played with it a little bit just to see, okay, if I listen to this advice, what happens? And it was not a good fit for me. Like I was forcing myself to eat in the morning when I did because I like to work out in the morning. And she said, don't do it on an empty stomach, women, dudes, if you want to do it, totally fine. And so I was forcing myself to eat in the morning, then work out, then eat again. Not a ton, but still, it was food I did not want. I didn't crave it. It didn't make me feel good to have it. And I ended up gaining weight. And I'm like, nope, this experiment is over. Like I gotta go back to the things that I know work really well for me. So again, with hypnosis, getting very in tune with your body. And with soul empowering hypnosis, one of the things that we can help a lot with is body wisdom. And so really finding out, what does the body want? What does it need? And then once you start having your hypnosis sessions where you're connecting in that way, you start to have a real relationship, a real dialogue with your body and what it wants. And you start to trust it a lot more so that, yes, that woman is an expert. And I bet she's right for, let's say, 90% of the population, women. But then there's going to be that 10% where for whatever reason, we are responding in a totally different way. Another thing that I want to say in terms of really smart ways to deal with addiction, you heard Aaron mention it earlier that he had seen when he was younger people in his family suffering from obesity and having things like diabetes. And as a youngster, he knew, like, I don't want my life to go in this direction. And so there's a real beauty in intellectualizing for some of us. Again, there's never going to be a one size fits all solution. but there's a beauty in learning from other people's mistakes, but then also intellectualizing it for yourself. And I have this funny, cute story from when I was 6 years old. And I joked about this on the last episode where like I was addicted to sucking my thumb. I'm laughing, but I'm also serious. Like in kindergarten, I remember having to like stick my head under the table, get a quick hit, and then pop back up. Like, okay, we're back on. We're good for a few more minutes. And so, like, if anybody else was sucking their thumb in kindergarten, I didn't see it, and it just seemed like it was just me. And I remember my mother, and so I'm like, oh, I said 6 earlier. I don't know why, but I must have been 5 because this was all in kindergarten. And so, my mother, she made a deal with me. Keep in mind, I'm 5, and she said that she would quit coffee if I quit sucking my thumb. And so, so I kept sucking my thumb. I wasn't able to keep the deal, but then a few weeks, maybe a couple of months later, we went up to Michigan to celebrate Christmas with our families, and my cousin, who was 16 at the time, I remember walking into the room and he was sitting on the couch watching TV, and he was sucking his thumb while watching TV. And I remember as a 5-year-old looking at that and just being scared straight. And I was like, this cannot become my life. And I like cold turkey. I was like, I'm off the thumb. I am off the thumb. Like, we are not doing this anymore. And then I remember going to my mother and saying, like, I'm not sucking my thumb anymore. This is over. So, you know what? You got to quit coffee. And she was like, oh, that deal expired a long time ago. And what's funny is I think that really sat with me as a kid because I've never had coffee to this day. Like, even as a little kid, I was like, no more thumb. We're not doing coffee. Like, my brother and I, we've never had cigarettes. He's never had alcohol. So there's something within us where I suspect he also has an addictive personality because he's very good at exercising. Like, he will run a lot. He's an ER doctor. So I think you probably have to have some sort of addictive personality to be really successful, really academic. Like, you have to have some like thing where you can do more of something than other people are willing to do. So that's like the positive side of having an addictive personality. I love certain types of exercise. So I'm going to lean into my addictive personality when it comes to the healthy things. And then when it comes to the not healthy things, I've just got to be really honest with myself about what's happening. And sometimes that's learning from other people's mistakes. Sometimes that's intellectualizing something. We might get into it today. We might not, but I recently was dealing with a highly emotional experience that intellectually I understood I should not be so sad about a certain thing that was happening in my life, but I was still very sad about it. And so a way to cope with that was extraordinarily helpful is I turned to Chat GBT. And so I thought, okay, I know that if I can just get some like mental awareness and understanding about why am I so sad about this thing, losing this thing that I know is not good for me. I just wrote to Chat and I said, hey, here's the situation. I'm super sad about this whole thing. I know I don't need to be. And then I said, I fully honor and love emotions. Like, I love emotions. I think that they're so good. They're so helpful. We need them, right? So I'm not trying to push that. And I was telling Chad, this was like, I'm not trying to push away the emotions, but I need a coping mechanism right now. And I think an intellectual understanding of what is going on will help me cope. And Chad, like, 10 out of 10, like nailed it. Like, it ran through and was like, well, this is what, and that's how I ended. I was like, what do you think is going on with me? And so it was like, here is all of the information of like why you're probably feeling this way. And then it even started to ask me some follow-up questions about like my childhood. And I was like, yep. And so it was super interesting reading through that. And of course I was like ugly crying while I was reading through it. So again, I love the emotions of everything, but being able to have that intellectual understanding of what was going on, because Chad was making some really good points that even though the tears have started to wane and subside, the intellectual knowledge that I now have from that conversation is still there. Like, the advice that it gave me for proceeding and moving forward is still there. Like, it was really helpful. And so I know a lot of people resist AI and resist Chat GPT. I would give it a chance. Like one of my clients, he wrote to me the other day and he said, "Hey, they just did a study and people who compared therapy sessions with a trained, professional, successful therapist, and then the client had a session with ChatGPT, and when comparing the person versus the AI, people preferred the AI responses. And I have to say, it has a soothing way about it. It's very, very soothing, and it gets it right because it's drawing from everything, right? And the
Hmm.
person, the therapist, and I'm not one of those people like when Kindles came out and people were like books were going away, I'm like books are never going away. Like you want that tactile sensation, like you want to be able to write notes and things. I don't think that like people and closeness and connection are ever going away. I think that we need that more than ever while also utilizing these things that are just they're superior in terms of being able to draw all of that knowledge in. And so Chad was able to draw from every source to say, Courtney, I got you. Like, this is what is happening. And I was like, holy crap, this is so helpful. And yeah. And so it was asking me follow up questions and I was answering. And like, it started to make sense of the whole thing. And it really, really settled down my brain where I was like, oh, and like one of the things that was saying to me, which I think is very interesting considering this conversation about addiction, is it said to me, your brain and your body are going through withdrawal. And that is why, even though intellectually you understand that this was a bad situation that you're in, you're still losing a lot of good things that you thought were there. And so, even just thinking of like, oh, this, what I'm going through is withdrawal, well, then I can get very logical about that and go, well, whenever somebody goes through withdrawal from whatever it may be, could be drugs, could be alcohol, could be, I don't know, Cheetos, whatever it is, withdrawal is actually a really, in my head, is really a great thing to find out that that's what you're going through because there's a conclusion to that. That is not an infinite thing. Like that is a thing that is challenging in the beginning, that has a half life and eventually wanes and then eventually is done. So long as you don't reactivate the thing, right? So yeah, just it was very, very, very helpful. And so if anybody's resisting it, I would give it a chance. I would really give it a chance. And I do not think that it's replacing people. I think that it is supplementing where people are not necessarily a lot of therapists bring their own baggage to the
Hmm.
sessions. Yeah. And they're people. They can't possibly know everything. They can't, right? And chat just it draws from so much and it is not biased and it has a very caring tone to it. So there's also like it's very soothing in the way that it's presenting information, very non-judgmental and like
So,
sweet. Yeah.
so was everything favorable that came up? There was nothing that came up in what you read that you questioned. It
Oh,
was all,
favorable in terms of was it getting it right?
yeah.
Yeah, I got it right over and over and over again. Like over and over and over again. Maybe one day I'll pull it up and share the high points for people because I think what I was slash am still experiencing is probably something that everybody has experienced at least once in their life. And if you're still alive, we'll probably experience it again. so so it's just it's the heartbreak of like a relationship that you enjoy but also know is not the right one for you, like concluding a relationship like that. And so I think that everybody, whether it's a friendship or a family member or a romantic or even a job that maybe is part of your identity, like there's so many things that we participate in that for whatever reason we know it's not good for us, and at some point we have to say goodbye to that thing, and it can be really, really hard even when you know it's for the best for everybody involved.
Um, uh, just along that line, when you're getting the messages that you're not listening to, what's
When you say not
what's
listening
the
to, can you give me a little more detailed?
uh, okay when you know you're your connection is not a good connection,
Okay.
and you
Yeah.
still remain in it.
Hmm.
Is part of the reason why you're remaining in it because there's still something to be learned, or are you remaining in it because you just physically want to remain in it?
Are you talking about my specific situation, or do you mean more generalized? I'm
I'm
happy to
speaking in
answer
general.
either.
Uh,
Okay. Yes. So I would say I can answer it in general, but I will draw from my specific situation to answer it in a way that makes sense for me. And then if you want more details, just tell me. So for me in this particular relationship, I ask those questions of myself where I'm like, okay, so this is really, really good in some regard, this relationship. And it is also really not in other regards. And knowing that it was one of those things where I always knew that it would be a temporary relationship, right? No matter how much I liked it. And what's also interesting is I saw this relationship coming in a hypnosis session, and also a very like psychic, like weird psychic moment that I had. And then also I saw a psychic and she talked about this person coming. So it's like the universe was saying like this is coming, including like the primary negative reason that like it's never going to work out, which was the psychic told me. I was like, nah, never gonna happen. And we'll get to that in a second. Anyway, and I lost my train of thought. It was really, really good, but it's also really challenging. Why was it? Why would I say in the? Sorry.
mhm.
By the way, guys, I told Aaron in the beginning of this, I was like, I might get a little scatterbrained because I'm still like emotionally dealing with all of this, and said, please keep me straight. So, Aaron, please keep me straight. What was your question again? Sorry.
Just as far as knowing that there's still a lesson,
Thank
or
you.
or
Lesson.
understanding the lesson.
Yeah, lesson. Okay, so as I was going through this whole process and knowing like this has to wrap at some point. That was definitely one of the questions that I asked myself. Like I knew this relationship was coming. This relationship is very purposeful. Have I gotten all of the lessons, the experiences, the shifts, the whatever it is that I was supposed to experience from this? And then also likewise for the other person, right? Like it's not all about me. Like have they also gotten the good things that they were meant to experience from the relationship as well? um and for me, yeah, I got everything that I needed a long time ago, which made like the whole like lingering of it even more challenging and confusing. Yeah, so I would say that anybody who is in any situation that is challenging to always ask, what are the lessons? Because once you know what they are, then it helps you move on in a more complete way.
And you definitely always have to ask and listen and trust what you're getting and try to go forward. And honestly, it's not always easy. That's just the reality. That's not always easy to go forward.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you always have to look at it that it's going to end up in the future for your greatest good, for however difficult it may be initially.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting too in terms of people who are very caring, um, caregivers in particular, like that personality type where they want to help others, healers, things like that, teachers, the people who come to the planet to be of service and to be really, really helpful. I think that sometimes they can really have, I'm speaking from experience, they can have a real challenge with wrapping up relationships where they know it's not that great for them, but they can still see the benefit that the other person is getting. So, like, I bring a lot of stability, a lot of nurturing, a lot of love, a lot of affection to the relationship. And I'm fully aware of how much that person thrives in those conditions. I'm also fully aware of, the more challenging turn that that person's life could take should a really stable person not be ever present and ever vigilant and like always like I feel like have you ever seen those really cool gymnastics saves where there's a spotter, right? And so
Hmm.
there's a compilation of like the most impressive saves that these spotters have done. And I feel like I have been operating for like a year and a half as a spotter, where like I can just see these and I'm like, boom, like in there and like catching, and then boom, and then like in there and catching. And I'm really good at it, it turns out. I'm also tired. I'm like, oh my God, like I need some rest. But then for me, like a lot of great things transpired because of the relationship, and so much learning and a different way of being. Like I'm a lot more fun, and there's just things that I learned that I hadn't been exposed to at all, because this person is very out of my comfort zone. Like I always date the same guy over and over again. This one was very different. So brought a lot of good things that I had not been exposed to, which I'm grateful for. And whoever I date next will be very grateful for too, because I'm a lot more fun as a result of this. So that's good.
and and you're taking the positive out of it. I I want to back up on something that were saying. Being the spotter, as you say, could
Mhm.
that be an addiction?
I do. That's a great question. Like, what's the person getting out of it, right? I think it could be. I don't think it necessarily is in my case. I do think that people who are caregiver personality types, so again, like the healers of the world, the teachers of the world, I think we have to be really careful, because I don't know that I would use, again, for some people, yes, sure, because that's their identity. Like they're getting so much out of um, being of service, and that's who they are, that they kind of can't stop, even though that is to their detriment. I would say in my case, we all have gifts and some things come pretty easy to us, and this is something that apparently just comes very naturally to me. And I think it's probably just from years of like making my own mistakes, right? And analyzing my own shortcomings and safety netting myself, right? And so if you've learned how to do that for yourself, because none of us are perfect. And so just an easy example of that is I'm very out of sight, out of mind. And if I need to remember something, I am going to, like, if I'm about to leave the house and I need to remember this thing, I will put that thing in my physical path to block me. So I've been learning how to safety net myself for years and years and years. And so if there's somebody else who's not bothering to safety net themselves and I care about them, then it's really easy for me to just instinctually like do that thing. It doesn't really feel like an addiction. It just feels like something I'm good at and I think is worthwhile. But then over time, just yeah, some people need more of that. And yeah, my quota has been hit. So,
And I asked that question because there are some people, and frequently it's females that get into a relationship with someone that needs to be fixed.
mhm.
And I fully get the concept that some women want to mold a man, but there's some women that want to get into a relationship with someone that has things that need where they have a need, or the person they have a need to be needed,
Yeah,
a need to be able to fill something, that a deficiency that someone else has.
yeah, that
And
definitely can happen for sure.
uh, and I look at that and just wonder how much of an addiction that can be, because you have some women that constantly go through that cycle of they're with one man that has major issues to be addressed, then they move on to the next man and he has major issues to be addressed, and it's almost as if they're magnetizing the same man in
Yeah,
different skin,
yeah.
but similar situations over and over again.
Yeah, I would say whenever somebody is doing things like that, and it can be really easy to do. Like I've noticed it in myself, and it's not about dating. Like it's funny. I've always had a good picker. Like I've always had a good picker, but then I started was analyzing myself throughout this relationship, and I'm like, did I? Did I ever like? Did I have a good picker? I think that I maybe got really lucky, and that my school that I went to just weeded out certain personality types so that like the pool that I was drawing from were already like very responsible, goal-oriented, really intelligent academics. Like, I think that I didn't necessarily have a good picker. I was just placed in a situation where like everybody was great. so so it made it a lot easier. But yeah, I've been paying attention to, well, what am I getting out of focusing so much on somebody else? And I think that a lot of people need to hear this. I think sometimes we pay attention to helping others as a way to avoid working on our own stuff. We're avoiding addressing our own stuff. We're avoiding like even acknowledging our own stuff. It's so easy to go into hyper, and I'm not saying that I did this. But I can see other people doing it. It's so easy to go into hyperfixation mode of whether it's their dog or their husband or their best friend or their, and it really, for some people, feels like avoidance of their own issues. So if we would call that addiction, I don't know, but it is a hyperfixation on others as a way to very cleanly avoid their own stuff while also feeling like a saint because they're doing such a good job of helping others. So that's for sure something that that people need to be aware of. I think that the spiritual community, you can see that a lot in the spiritual community where they will frequently talk about the issues that other people have or other groups have or other beliefs have. And meanwhile, the people saying all this, they're kind of mean-spirited themselves. And so you can see that it's really just them trying to focus on anything other than their own issues. Again, is that an addiction? I don't know, but it definitely could present like one because they're so fixated on something else to their own detriment, even though they don't even realize it's to their own detriment for an extended period of time.
That makes
Very good
sense.
question. Yeah.
That definitely makes sense.
And then, oh, go ahead. And then I want to make sure that I mention how hypnosis can help in a variety of, like, we should probably say,
That's what I was going to ask.
oh, okay, perfect, perfect. So thinking about eating and food. And then also, I don't know if Enos is still on, but he mentioned in the chat, he said that he's been helping. He's also a really gifted hypnotherapist. He said he's been helping clients with smoking, gambling, and sugar addiction for years. And then he said diet is not the answer. Healthy lifestyle is the answer. He's so right, too, because I think that a huge part of this, huge, is self-care and self-love. And so that's another reason that hypnosis is so helpful because it can really help you tap into loving yourself, taking good care of yourself. So for example, I don't know if I want to say this or not because I don't want to share anybody else's information. Sometimes people, when it comes to addictions, love the substance or the thing or the whatever it is. And I'm using love in a very unhealthy way, like an abusive version of love where it's not love. It is not love. It is, it's like fool's gold, right? It's a feeling.
Mhm.
And yeah, it seems like there's a lack of self-love, which allows that fool's gold version of love to creep into their lives and take over. And that's really, really sad to watch. And then to see like the denial and the delusion that goes along with that. Like you hear about denial, but it's one thing to hear about denial. It's another thing to witness it, where you're just like this person teases me for believing in fairies. And I'm like, I think fairies might be more real than the shit that's coming out of your mouth about like how delusional you are about this issue. Like my money's on fairies, honestly. So yeah. But I think that if people who have any form of addiction, maybe one of the I don't know if this is right, but maybe one of the first steps that they can take is rather than trying to rid themselves of that thing that is bad for them, because a lot of times they don't want to rid themselves of that thing. They are holding on to it because they think it makes them happy. Probably a good strategic first step would be to utilize hypnosis to start to access more self-love and then just let the dominoes fall from there. Because if you're prioritizing your own health, like eventually, could take weeks, months, years, eventually you will cut out the crap whatever it is, if the focus is I've got to love myself, I've got to take good care of myself. And so that's a great way to begin that process. That's very gentle.
So clarify, are you saying rather than start with the issue, the first thing to do is to focus on your own self love and let it grow from there?
As we're talking about this right now, this is like the first time that I've really thought about these thoughts. But again, just having observed some of this stuff very closely for an extended period of time, even though everybody on the planet would go, you should stop engaging in these things. Like, this is obviously objectively bad for you. And maybe not for other people on the planet, but it is bad for you. If that person believes that that thing is bringing them joy in any way, shape, or form, they don't want to stop that activity. They just don't want to. Like, it seems to not even matter like what they lose as a result of engaging in that activity. They're so convinced that they need that thing, and they're so convinced that it makes their lives better, that they are just blind to the reality of it. And there's no way you're going to get that person to quit that thing. No hypnosis session is going to get them to quit that thing, because they don't want to. They desperately want to keep that thing, right? And so I think strategically to lean into self-love and just say, whatever, keep doing your stuff, but like, let's lean into self-love. I really feel like inevitably, it could take a long time, but I feel like inevitably that those negative things start to fall away, because it's so hard to, let's say that you start exercising, right? It's so hard to then keep up bad diet, because like you realize that you're making the exercise a lot harder because you're doing the bad diet. And so just one thing leads to another. Well, it's like, okay, well, if I'm exercising, I should eat cleaner. Okay, well, if you're exercising and you're eating cleaner, guess what? If you have alcohol in those healthy conditions, you can really feel how alcohol makes you feel like shit. Now, if you're already feeling like shit and you have alcohol, whatever, like you can't even feel a bump. Like it's no change. You just went from feeling like shit to feeling like shit. There's no difference, right? And so you start to become more aware and more sensitive of when you're feeling good, and then that dip that occurs from something, and then enough of those dips occur in it. And if you're working on self-love, then you don't want those dips anymore. Like, why would you? Because you're harming somebody that you love now. So
So, and I don't know if this what I'm thinking in terms of just to play devil's advocate with the concept of self love.
sure.
Can a person take that self love to begin with and use that as a method of empowering things that they know that they shouldn't be doing because they're saying, I love myself, I want this, and I'm going to have it?
You mean like a distorted version of self-love where it's not really?
Yes.
You
Yes.
can hide, like anybody can twist anything and hide behind anything. Yeah, I'm sure that somebody could say this is self-love, this is self-care. This person in particular really does not feel like they can be happy without these things. Like, really feels a level of like blah or depression or anxiety or all of the above. Um, and really feels like he needs something outside of himself to feel an improvement in that. So yeah, it's one of those things, those lies that we tell ourselves where it's making things better, but it's clearly not. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Oh, so, following the root of self love and working on an addiction, is there a process, or does everything just fall into place? Or would there be a next step, or is the next step going to come naturally?
Okay. Table that, because I have really like on my brain to say this one thing and it's not going
Okay.
away. So I didn't even really hear you because it was in there so strongly. Um, I want to make sure that I say something that is more relatable, because a lot of people don't have the more challenging addictions. They have the more normal person addictions. And your question about self love and how it can get really twisted, it made me think about this thing that I saw once. It's a really good, very anybody could understand this. Um, Somebody that I care about a lot who wanted to be healthier and trim down. She wasn't heavy, but she still wanted to trim down. It was a goal of hers. I remember meeting her for lunch and she ordered dessert first. And I'm sorry to anybody who's done this and like thinks that it's self-love. And if I'm being a jerk, I apologize. But I remember seeing her order dessert first and then make this declaration of that she's practicing self-care and like doing the things that she wants and the things that like feel better for her. And I'm just sitting there like, this is garbage. Like you have a sugar addiction, and who in the hell orders dessert as the first thing that they're going to eat for lunch and then like and has this goal of getting healthier and wants to trim down. Like none of this, like the cognitive dissonance in that choice, and then like the BS like story that she was telling herself about it. It's one of those things where I like to then like I'm not going to say that out loud and say like, are you crazy? Like I'm not going to, because she is clearly going through some self-delusion that I'm not going to penetrate. Like I'm just going like, okay, you deal with that on your own later. I don't know how to handle this level of crazy. But what I do like to do is then go, where's my crazy? Like I probably have those areas in my life where I bullshit myself. And I've also done that with food just in a different way where I'm like, oh, well, my parents were really strict with me regarding food. And so an act of self-love is that I'm a little looser about like maybe I can have not as the first thing that I eat, but maybe I can have the side of chips or I can and I can't. I can't. I don't feel good energetically, physically, mentally whenever I have junk food and I gain weight and I don't like how I feel when I'm heavier than the weight that feels best for me. And so it took years, sometimes to learn quickly, sometimes to learn slowly. It took years of me lying to myself and saying, no, this is self care, this is self love, because I'm doing the opposite of what my parents did. And then eventually I was like, discipline is actually an act of self love. Like they didn't discipline me in a way that felt good. Like I can discipline, and I don't mean discipline punish. I mean discipline like be disciplined and make the right choices consistently. Um, it took me a long time, but eventually I made my way to like, oh, it's actually the discipline is the self love and the self care, um, and I really wish that people would give their good choices more of a chance. And I think that this is where self love is very helpful as well. Sometimes people will exercise for like 2, 3 days, and then when they're not skinny on day three, you have to have that faith. Like you have to have the faith that this is barely working right now, but it's going to work a little bit more tomorrow. And it's going to work a hell of a lot come 2 weeks from now, which really is not that far down the road. And a lot of people give up really quickly. And I think if the self love is there, you're not giving up on yourself because part of the act, being the result of being skinny, just for this particular example, the result of being skinny, yes, that's wonderful. But the discipline is the act of the self-love and the self-care. I like to exercise in nature, so I'll give this example, but like the act of like getting the fresh air, the act of getting the sunshine in the morning, the act of being around the trees, that, you know what I mean? Like there's so much self-care and self-love involved in the way that I like to exercise. And other people are going to like to do it a different way. But for me, I make sure that whenever I am doing self-care that maybe has a little bit of inertia in the beginning, like I started to learn, don't overdo it, right? Like if you're gonna be lazy and not exercise for a while, you can't go straight back 100% to your old routine because inevitably you're gonna be sore and you're gonna be frustrated. And so just like ease back into it, but have the discipline and know that if you're doing the easing back into it, that you're gonna be chubby for a little bit longer before you get to the version of yourself that feels best, and to just like have that discipline, that self-care, that self-love. um, and again, I feel like hypnosis is really really helpful for that because for me at least, and for most people, they begin to like themselves more, they begin to love themselves more even when they're not trying to. The hypnosis just has that natural side effect. So it's a very gentle, easy, effective way to get over that initial hump of not taking good care of yourself.
So, what would the next step be
Thanks. Great
beyond that?
job. Really good job. So after the self love, self care, and
Hmm.
discipline, give me a little more. Like, can you give me an example so I have an idea of like, because I think that probably satisfies most of it. But then, like, where are you in your head on this?
Uh, Self love is the starting point, and self love is where everything grows to. But is there a push? And I understand you're saying let a lot of these things happen naturally, but even as they're happening naturally, isn't there a point where you still have to take a step forward beyond the comfort zone?
Let's do weight loss because everybody understands that so well. Either they
Okay.
have gone through that journey or they know somebody who's gone through that journey. It's so palatable. Can you take me through like an example where you're saying the self love, self care has made it to a certain point and now we didn't need a next step? And then I'll have a better understanding of the question.
So let's take the person they're on that self love journey.
Hmm.
They're acknowledging the fact that they need to eat better.
Hmm.
They're taking steps to eat better.
Hmm.
They're staying away from certain foods.
Hmm.
As they're doing this, that repertoire of foods improves,
Hmm.
but then stagnates. Is there a step that
Um,
has to be taken to make sure that things don't stagnate?
so they plateau.
Yes, that's the perfect word because
Okay.
that
I've been
plateau is
on a weight
perfect for
loss.
dieting.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have been focusing on weight loss for pretty much my whole life. The word is plateau. So, okay, so once they plateau, and then it feels like okay, the self love, the self care, the action, the discipline, but then the plateau hits. Okay, so this is another area where hypnosis is extremely helpful. This is actually, yeah, I'm so glad that you're bringing this up. Let's go with weight loss again. So easy to understand. So I think I told this story before. We're going to tell it again. It's perfect. I noticed a pattern with myself. I'm 5'4", and when I was growing up, I was a high school football cheerleader, and I remember what I weighed in high school because my coach would give me a lot of grief about it because apparently, God, I miss the 90s. You could just say whatever you wanted. Nobody cared. Nobody was pacey at all. Like this lady was like, you need to lose weight. I was skinny. I was in shape. She's like, you need to lose weight. Like, I really do miss those times. Like where everybody was just honest. Um, and so I'm 5'4", and so she was saying to the cheerleaders, at 5 feet, you should be 100 pounds. And every inch over that, you can add 5 more pounds. So if you do the math on me, I should be 120 pounds, not 126. Now, I am born to a very muscular family. I pick up muscle very quickly. I'm lucky that way, but muscle weighs more than fat, right? So of course I'm going to be a little heavier just because like I got a lot of muscles, which is great now that I'm older and I understand how healthy that is. I'm like, good job, everybody. You're crushing it. But when you're 16 and you've got a lady saying that you should lose weight, and I never could, but I remember my weight from back then. So fast forward to being an adult. And every time I would lose weight, and it's in healthy ways that I like to lose weight. Like I'm going to eat cleaner, I'm going to exercise more, I'm going to pay closer attention to my calories. I'm not going to be too extreme about it. I'm just going to monitor and be aware, right? So, but every time I would get to 124, I would stop losing weight. Every time. Didn't matter how I was getting there, didn't matter my mindset, nothing. Like I would get to 124 and I would plateau every single time and then inevitably start to tick back up, right? And this went on for like 2 decades. This is such a long period of time. And eventually, I had a session with Liz, my co instructor for the Soul Empowering Hypnosis Certification Training. And I had a session with her. I was like, Liz, like, I have to figure this out. Like, what is going on? This is summer of 2023. So, approaching 2 years ago. I was like, every time I get to 124, I plateau and then inevitably tick back up. And I was like, I don't know what it is about that number, but there is clearly something about that number that as soon as I hit it, I activate into don't lose any more weight. And it's not like I was too skinny. It was never that. It wasn't malnourishment. Like I really did have like some more pounds to go to be my best. And so we went into that hypnosis session and we asked, like, what is it about 124? And what I found, I never would have guessed in a million years, but it makes perfect sense. What I found out is that the last time that I weighed 124, I'm obviously a little bit younger than high school cheerleader age. I'm more like 14, 13, right? So I'm younger at that point. And when I was 13, that's when the physical, like hitting abuse really picked up for me. Like my brother didn't get abused very much at all. He and I have very different personalities. And so he's much more amenable. He's much more likable. He's much more agreeable. I'm very like, this is some real bullshit. Like I will run my mouth even if I know I'm going to get hit and kicked, and like I will still run my mouth. Like there's a story in my book. It's not exaggerated in any way. When I'm in high school and my father is like throwing me to the ground and like and he's a really muscular guy. He was the health and physical education professor at the local community college. Like he basically worked out for his job. So he's very, very strong, very muscular. And he's throwing me to the ground like over and over again and just daring me to get up. And I did. Like I just got up over and over and over again. And like he would just keep slamming. Like I didn't care. Like it was like, fuck, sorry, earmuffs, everybody. Fuck you. Like I don't care. Like what you're doing, you're not gonna break my spirit. And so I got hit a lot because I was like, fuck you. Like I'm not going to become a coward because of you. I'm gonna speak my mind. Like I'm not gonna like break. And so what I discovered in that hypnosis session is I'm about 124, like whenever that stuff like really starts to pick up, and I'm really starting to get physically abused a lot. And for my body, it feels like if I go under 124, I'm starting to lose like some protection of like what I think is protecting me. Like I don't want to get back to that younger age weight. I want to stay in my adult weight because my adult weight is the weight that like keeps me more protected. Right. And so as soon as I realized that, I was like, oh shit, like we don't live there anymore. Get skinny. And I immediately started losing weight and I got under 124, no problem. Like we don't live in that house anymore. Like you can be as cute as you want. So yeah. Yeah.
So ultimately, in your situation, your body was responding to what was in your head.
Yeah. Didn't want to go to a weight that
But
reminded it of being that young when things really started to go off the rails. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, never, not in a million years. And for all of the weight loss sessions that I've done for people, there have only been a couple that would really surprise me in terms of why the weight was there. And that's one of them. Like I did not see that coming because it's usually the stuff that anybody who's informed would make an educated guess about, that it's some form of protection, but it's usually in a different version of protection. I told this story before. I really love it. But one of my clients, she gained weight after her mom passed to then adopt the body shape of her mom that was a little bit heavier than her. And so gaining that weight to have a body shape more like her deceased mother was a way for her to still feel close and connected to her. And at the end of that session, I remember her just sweetly saying out loud to her mom, she said, "Goodbye, Mom." Like it was so sweet and it was so final. Like she meant it in a really, really nice way. And then yeah, go figure, she ended up booking a trip to Peru. And then she started training for that trip to Peru because, you know, all these stairs, all these big hikes, like, so she started training for this trip and she didn't see it. It was like, hey, like you just guaranteed weight loss for yourself because now you're training for this trip. But it happened immediately after the session. I'm like, good for you. And yeah, she trimmed down really quickly. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I know. But yeah, there are these reasons that we hold on to things. And so hypnosis is really, really good at uncovering what you would not see coming, but is very much impacting your life on a daily basis, and you don't know it.
So, what about hypnosis and other forms of eating disorders?
Mm. I have one of my favorite stories is from this little girl. She was 16, and this was at this is the summer of 2020. So, the whole world is closed down. And I think when you were an adult dealing with 2020, it was weird enough, but can you imagine being a high schooler and dealing with it? And so she ended up having anorexia. And again, people who are well informed know that in general, a lot of eating disorders are very directly connected to having a lack of control in your life, because what you eat is one of the few things that you have a strong sense of agency over. And so her dad was really, really smart and brought her to me to have a session. And this was, I would say, with any type of addiction or disorder, such as an eating disorder, a dialogue with the symptom is a great, great way to start to address like what's going on with this symptom. And if anybody's curious about dialogue with the symptom, I'm happy to do a follow up discussion detailing that. But it's an extremely easy and effective way to find out like what's going on. And so we did a dialogue with the symptom with her eating disorder, and what came in as the eating disorder is there was this friend. That's what he went by. He had a more masculine energy. And this friend was the one that was looking out for her, helping her to stay in shape for her dancing. So she was a dancer. And so he said that he was looking out for her. And a lot of times, whenever you do a dialogue with a symptom, you can actually feel the sincere care and protection that that symptom really is trying to offer that person. Like, again, almost always it's some form of protection. And when that is sincere, even if it's going awry, where you're like, I don't want to be chubby, and it's like, but I'm trying to take. You can feel the sincerity of it. When we were talking to this friend, and he was saying that he was looking out for her, I could just feel that he was not nice. Like, this is not something good. He's lying, right? Which is very strange for me because I almost never experience anything like that. Almost always what happens in hypnosis sessions is actually really warm and happy, and or not even necessarily happy. Yes, sometimes, but warm, loving. Like, love is at the base of it, even if it's manifesting as something undesirable. And this one, I was just like, yuck. Like, there's something real, like, untrustworthy and like not good about this friend. And so I normally, normally I would engage the client a little bit more and have them start to self-advocate. But this is a 16-year-old girl, and this friend is something different than what I've experienced before. And I was like, hey, can I just talk to him directly? Is that okay? She was like, yeah. I was like, just have him say like whatever he needs to say. And so instead of like having her be sort of a third party, I was like, just tell me what he's saying. Um, and I had a whole negotiation with him, and the way that we were able to help him move on is because, luckily, like, if you know someone who's selfish, they're self-interested, right? He's not there to help her. He's bullshitting. And so I was like, this guy is really self-interested. He is selfish. And so I thought there's no amount of negotiation that we're going to get through to him to be of service to this little girl. Like, he doesn't give a shit about helping her. He just wants to help himself. And so then I was thinking, like, what can we do? Like, what's the thing that I can say that will help get him out of there in a self-serving way? And so luckily, thank you, universe. I'm sure my team gave it to me because, again, this is a very rare situation for me to be in. I said, hey, friend, where's a place that you can go to that would be an upgrade for you, that you would actually like even better than hanging out with her? And he was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that before. And I'm like, we're in. He's going to go because we're going to figure it out. Like, he just wants to serve himself. So let's find a better place for him. Right. And so then he was like, well, I'm not really sure. And I was like, well, would you be open to me exploring and finding out if there's a place that's better for you? And he was like, okay, sure. So then I tap in and then I find this planet that not find, it came in. And then there's this planet with these sort of like little Ewok, like from Star Wars, like sort of like little Ewok
Mhm.
beings that were holding hands, looking out this window on this planet, watching fireworks that were going off from another nearby planet. It was really cute. Like, it was very nice and charming. And so I started to describe this scene and I was like, you can go there. Like, me talking about it can take you there. And so he starts to go there. I was like, it's pretty nice there. Do you like it? Does it feel good? He was like, it is pretty nice here. I was like, do you want to stay? I was like, sure. What's funny is every time I tell this story, everyone's like, so now the people on the planet are stuck with it. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, the girl's my client. I'm sure the Ewok things were fine. But yeah, yeah. But that was the thing. We just had to go like pure self-centeredness with him. And that motivated him to go. And then, of course, I always record the sessions, and she gave her dad permission to listen to the session. And he wrote to me later, and he was like, "I don't know what that was, but it worked." I'm like, "Thank God," because yeah, just sometimes you have to approach it differently. Again, hypnosis, it's so helpful in very unexpected ways.
That's an amazing, amazing story.
Yeah, yeah, the whole
And
thing's great, including her
um,
dad looking out for her and taking her to the session. Like, dad of the year. That's fantastic.
uh, that is the whole. I mean, it's good that it's noted now, but the whole thing with just eating disorders as a whole, it's so frequently not acknowledged that it's actually stemming from something, and people just attribute it to how a person is just feels like being, and there's so much more to it. That's I think we're only at the tip of the iceberg of people starting to accept and understand and support. Um, I have another just another question along the addiction line
Sure.
and hypnosis. Can the hypnosis uh, be done at in some manner at a chemical level for a person to actually recover from whatever an addiction may be?
Give me a little bit more detail
Uh,
when you say at a chemical level.
where you break down things, just as an example of dopamine or receptors and how the body responds to whatever the addiction is, or is it strictly done from the point of view of the actual addictive behavior?
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, are you asking, since we have so much scientific research on what's happening with addiction, can you then, so dopamine, for example, can you then utilize that information and incorporate it into a hypnosis session so that you can help the person on a chemical level, but through placebo effect, the hypnosis
Mhm.
session? Yeah, I would say yes. Have I done it before? Let me think. I don't think I have, but okay. They were like, no, you haven't. I'm like, thanks. Because it was not coming to me. Um, yeah, for sure. For sure you can. You would just need I think that the practitioner would need to have a pretty thorough understanding. Not that it's hard. Again, ChatGPT, like the internet, can really help you if you just spend a little bit of time with it. Can really help you to understand like the workflow of all of these things. I think that probably, again, I've not done this, but just intellectually, I imagine this would work pretty well. That if you as a practitioner have an understanding of the mechanics of it, and then on a conscious level before the session starts, that you understand it so well that you can then walk the client through, like, hey, this is one of the things that we're going to do. Walk them through it consciously so that they're not hearing it for the first time while they're in the session. And then, make sure they get an opportunity to ask follow-up questions so that they do understand, and then say, okay, now we're going to go into the session. And then you actually go through the experience of the thing. I bet that that could be really, really effective. I see that working very well. And I've said this before in another live, and I want to say it again. I think it's such a big deal. People use the term placebo effect as a pejorative. where they'll say, oh, that's just placebo effect. Placebo effect is amazing. And I want to give credit where credit is due. It's actually the husband, Charles, that made me realize that. This is before hypnosis even came into my life. He was like, I don't understand why people speak negatively about placebo effect. Like, that's actually really interesting and very amazing that people are able to do that. I was like, you're totally, totally right. Like, everybody uses it as a way to dismiss something. And he's
Mhm.
like, no, like, that's actually really incredible. And so he is the one who said that made me realize, like, that is really incredible. Like, why do we do that other than let's be conspiracy theorists? I mean, if I was big pharma and I wanted to shit talk my main competitor, which is the placebo effect, I would try to make people feel stupid about it too. And it's not hard to make people feel stupid. Like, all you have to do is just implant like uh certain ways of feeling about things and then make it become the norm, even though people don't even know why. Like, if you think about it, why is that a negative term? Why do we look down on that? That doesn't make any sense at all. And so, yeah, it's probably something that Big Pharma was like, this is our main competition. Let's just refer to it in a very insulting way where we can. And it worked.
I never thought about that aspect of big pharma.
I
I,
mean, they're able to put so
I,
much into, like, a lot of different things. They fund so much stuff that it's very easy to go, "Oh, that would actually be very easy propaganda for them to do."
yeah, they basically marketed a negative viewpoint on
Their
placebo.
competitor. Yeah, that's their main competition.
I never thought about that.
Mhm,
I absolutely never thought about that. And the mind is just, in general, is so powerful for what it can do and what it can heal, just based on the person's mindset, and mindset, understanding, and ability.
mhm.
And the the placebo effect is not a placebo effect. It's literally the mind taking action on what's there.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I know, like, we're so cool, right? And but then we can do that ourselves. We don't have to rely on anybody. We don't have to pay anybody. We don't have
Hmm.
to have side effects that we then need a second medicine and a third medicine and a fourth medicine for all this. Like, we can just heal ourselves. Um, and yeah, and so you could see very easily how people in those positions of power would then say, okay, this is our competition. I think if you think about the church, okay, you can't just pray directly to God. You have to have this middleman that you
Hmm.
tithe to. Are you kidding me? Yes, you can. Like, go hang out with a beautiful tree. Go pray by a beautiful tree. I bet you're gonna have a very spiritual experience, actually. Um, and then to continue to be a little conspiratorial, I highly suspect that the same thing is happening with hypnosis. I've railed on this before, but it's probably been a couple of months, so I'll just do it again briefly. Why is every portrayal of hypnosis negative? Like, there's so many cool, and I get that people will say, like, well, some of the more interesting stories that'll grab your attention as far as like making a fictional story, like mind control and rob a bank and you don't remember it, or murder somebody and you don't like, I get that that is very interesting and can make for a good story, but so can tapping into really amazing things and finding a past life love. And like, there's so many great hypnosis stories that could be told that are very positive and uplifting and very interesting. And none of those get told, which I think is extremely suspicious. And then let's not leave universities out of this. I think they're pretty naughty in terms of what we're finding out. Like, they're not really educating the children. They're charging them exorbitant amounts of money for degrees that are worthless. So they're kind of bad guys right now too. I think they used to be good guys. I don't think that they're good guys a lot of times anymore. Why is every exposure that these children at universities get, why is their exposure to hypnosis always stage hypnosis? Why is it always cluck like a chicken, think that you're naked? And it's never, oh, are you guys having high levels of stress? Well, hypnosis can help. Oh, would you guys like help with studying? Well, hypnosis can help. And so, like, there's nothing from these universities giving students access to the healthy version of this. It's always the version that makes it look really stupid and silly and like mind control. So it's just it's hypnosis is so helpful that for me it is highly suspicious that it is always put out into the public in a way that is negative. And
And
it competes with big pharma. Hypnosis competes with big pharma. It competes with religion. It competes with all of these things that have really taken control of everyday living, and a lot of people don't even realize it.
that's that's definitely true. You made me think of something. When I was in college, there was a hypnotist that would come in. I think they had him come every year, and every year when he came, he would always have people doing those things for
Hmm.
entertainment purposes.
And think about it. What
And
years were you in college? When were you in college?
80, 82 to 86,
And I was in
87,
college. What state were you in the United
Pennsylvania.
States? Okay. I was in a different state, Virginia, and I was in college 1997 through 2001. Why are we having the same exposure to hypnosis as college students, decades apart in different states? Like, what is going on? It's a little
But
too uniform. Yeah.
it's a pattern. But the thing that came to mind, there was a couple years that one of the administrators who was into our lifestyle, she brought in on her own accord someone to teach people how to do self hypnosis. It didn't get to garner the crowd of people that the other things garnered, but we were in a small environment and it was a small group of people that were interested in doing this other what this actual hypnotherapist came on campus to actually do and help people improve with things.
That's
And
awesome. I'm really happy to hear that.
it's just funny that the the useless thing attracted a large number of people, but when you take it outside of that scope, there was a handful of people. There was never a time that I attended that there was more than 15 people.
Yeah, it is interesting. People really want to be entertained.
I It just goes to show the hold that the system has on people and how they look at it and
Yeah.
don't take in any of the favorable aspects.
Yeah, well, I mean, marketing is very real. There's a reason that that people pay so much money for it. Marketing is really powerful, and I guarantee that the university was marketing the stage hypnosis more than the healing hypnosis.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's segue into a topic that I know we're going to cover. We're not going to cover it next, well, but let's also tease next week a little bit. Have you? This is not teasing next week. This is teasing probably the week after. Aaron, have you yet heard of the telepathy tapes?
The telepathy tapes. I
You're going to enjoy
I
this.
don't think I know them specifically. I know there's are these is this part of the CIA studies?
Not that I know of. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay, you
Okay.
ready? Okay, so again, I'll just quickly talk about what we're going to do next week, which is we're going to have Kelsey Cannon. I feel like Oprah Winfrey whenever I think of Kelsey's name, like the Kelsey Cannon. Like I just can't say her name in a normal way. It's the Oprah way or the highway. So Kelsey Cannon, Dr. Kelsey Cannon, we're going to have on next week. We're not going to be meeting on Monday like we normally are, March 10th. I have a different engagement that day. Plus, we're going to weave together a little bit of astrology. What we're going to be doing is having Kelsey on with Aaron and I at 6 p.m. Pacific on Friday, March 14th. The reason that we're meeting on that day is because astrologically, that March 13th, 14th is supposed to be the conclusion of something that started back on September 2nd of 2024. So guys, look at your text messages from September 2nd, 2024. Look at your camera roll, look at your calendar, like figure out what were you doing on September 2nd, or sometimes the day before or the day after. But basically, what was your general life like around September 2nd, 2024? And then what's supposed to be happening astrologically is the conclusion of that thing that started then, and it's concluding on March 13th, 14th. So in just a handful of days from now. The reason that Kelsey is getting roped into all of this is because I looked at my phone and I was like, all right, what was I doing on September 2nd, 2024? And when I was going through my camera roll, which is my best way of journaling and seeing like, what was I up to that day? I ended up seeing two different animals mentioned on that day. One was a screenshot that I took that had the word elephant in it. And then a few hours later was a photo that I took when I was on an evening hike, and it was around sunset. So there was still some daylight, and there was an owl, like a real life owl in the tree. Now, the reason that's important is that Kelsey, this is where Kelsey gets roped into it, that Kelsey and I, we were having a session swap. She's one of my soul empowering hypnosis certification students. And so we were doing a session swap, and it was all about the energy and theme of 2025. And the word was balance. Like she and I are both finding balance in our own personal ways. And we came to the session not knowing we were both going to be working on that same general thing. And the spirit animal that she got, that was supposed to be her confirmatory animal about all of what was happening in her session, was an owl. And the animal that I got, that was my confirmatory animal, was an elephant. And what's funny is, like, she started getting owls coming in for her, of course. And then for me, the next day, the Portland Zoo announced that they just had a baby elephant born. And that's not really that big of a deal. But a few days later, they announced this baby's name, and it translates to the word balance. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's cool. And so knowing that my animal, her animal, they're both in my camera roll on September 2nd, and she's a very busy person. She has a lot of clients, patients. She's actually available to join us on March 14th. So anybody who is interested in, like, what the heck is concluding, and conclusions are beautiful because they're the wrapping up of something, which means the allowing of the beginning of something else. If you guys want to look at what you're doing on September 2nd and then vibe with us on March 14th, and talk spirit animals and things like that, that's what we're going to be doing. Now, the week after, I strongly suspect that we will be focusing on the telepathy tapes. What is that? Joe Rogan. I love people with big platforms that do outside of the box things. So Joe Rogan recently had a guest on. Her name is Kai Dickens. Kai Dickens is the one who created the Telepathy Tapes podcast. What is that? All right. So there are, let me take a sip of water real quick. There are these kids. We all know them. We've all seen them. There are these kids that, I don't want to go with the phrase nonverbal, but let me start there, that they are nonverbal. So imagine a kid on the autism spectrum, nonverbal, but it's not really nonverbal. It's non-speaker. So what they're finding is, because verbal would imply, oh, well, you can't write. Oh, you can't read. Oh, so it's not that. It's that they're a non-speaker. Their motor skills are not coming together so that the thoughts that they're having are able to be spoken. But they are having thoughts, and they are able to express them when given the tools that they need. So what they have, and this is kind of fun in terms of like the stuff that we believe in, they call them spellers, right? So these spellers that are tools that help them, whether it's touching the letter of the alphabet and then the next letter and then the next letter to spell out something, or if they've got a different type of motor skill, they can touch a keyboard. So it's fun in terms of like that we think of a spell like a good witch spell, but these are spellers in a different way. And what's happening is that parents and teachers are reporting independently of each other, this is happening all around the world, that these kids that are non-speakers, they are telepathic. They are reading the minds, not necessarily of everyone, but of somebody who's close to them. So whether it's a parent or a teacher. And so they started studying this, and they're finding out, yeah, they are telepathic. And so if you think about it, they don't have the way of communicating that we do. They are picking up and utilizing a sense that probably we all have, but they don't have this one the way that we do. And so we over exercise our mouths, and then we atrophy our telepathy. Well, they can't over exercise their mouths. And so they're utilizing telepathy. And so what's very, very cool on top of that is that these kids who don't know each other in the physical. So these kids are in different states. They have not been introduced to each other in the physical or online or anything like that. They know, I'm getting goosebumps. They know that they can meet with each other and hang out with each other in a place that they call the hill. And so, and they're able to verify these things. Like I have so many goosebumps. There are these parents from Georgia compared to Minnesota, compared to England, where these kids are meeting with, again, this is all in their minds. And anybody who understands hypnosis should be able to wrap their mind around this very easily, because we think we can go to the sun. We think we can go to another planet. We think we can go into a past life. These children are doing this, but they're going to what they call the hill and hanging out with each other. And when they interview these kids about the hill, they're like, well, how many people are on the hill right now? And they're like, about 4,000. Like, this is a lot of people hanging out. And it's not necessarily a physical hill, but one of them named it the hill, and they all telepathically realized, like, oh, we're calling it the hill now. So there's a lot of validation of what we as spiritual people who have been mocked, harassed, dismissed, like there is a lot of validation for the things that we believe in that is finally getting studied because of these kids that are so brilliant in this different way. And I'm talking about proper scientific research. I'm not talking about like, anecdote, not that there's anything wrong with anecdotal evidence, but I'm talking about like a lot of confirmatory validating things that they're doing to make sure, yes, this person is definitely telepathic. And yes, like these people from across the world are actually confirming these things. And there's no way that they're communicating with each other through the internet or in person. It's really through this mind space. So, and for those who love crystals, the guy, Houston, who named it the hill, apparently like he really likes crystals a lot too. And his mom's not into them, but she brought home some crystals after going to get a foot massage or something. And then he found them and like started like spending a lot of time. So those who are into crystals, there's something for you too. Isn't that cool? So yeah, we'll end up talking about that after. I need to watch the telepathy tapes podcast fully to be able to talk about it, but we'll talk about it.
Yeah, I have to watch that. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
I'm highly intrigued because I've always felt there's the room to connect with those that are nonverbal,
Mm-hmm.
and that's opened up a whole new concept because that's with the ability to be able to do that, you can connect with so many at one
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I look forward to this. I'm
Yeah.
going to dig this out and start watching. I might watch some of this tonight or
Right.
listen to some of this tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I've got a couple of favorite stories that I haven't told yet on this that we'll end up talking about as well. That yeah, it's gonna be really, really interesting. And I really hope, I love when people type in the chat. I would really, really love for people to definitely engage with that one and type in like their different experiences related to telepathy or these kids that are really, really different and like so special. And one thing that I think is really exciting is we have a tendency, and I think we do this to animals as well. We have a tendency to dismiss things that are different than us and communicate in ways that are different than us and experience the world in ways that are different than us. And we have a tendency to think that they are lesser than in some way. And so these kids, they're brilliant. They have tons of thoughts and ideas and want to engage in the world and have the ability to do so. It's just that we haven't been giving them the tools. And so it's finally becoming better known. Like we have these tools that we can give them so that they absolutely are in there and they're absolutely having complex, creative, really interesting, profound thoughts that they would like to be able to express. So that's another beautiful thing where this is putting more light on these children have a lot to offer. And there's not less than us in any way. They're just really different. And frankly, I think even more capable because they're able to do these things that the vast majority of the population thinks is impossible. And the final thing that I'll say about this before we move on is the messages of love. like a huge thing with these kids is it's love. It's love and it's unity. Like
Mhm.
they don't have ill intentions, and they like the very beginning of the trailer, like if you go to YouTube and type in telepathy tapes and you look at the 2 minute or so trailer for the documentary that's coming, one of the first things it said is this young boy, Houston, he's telling his mom about the hill and about these abilities and telepathy. And she says to him, "That's impossible." And then he says in response, "You don't get these gifts if you lie." So there's a
Wow.
purity. Yeah, there's a pure they're highly their integrity is just so intact. There's a purity about them. It's very loving. It's very based in unifying, so unity as opposed to um uh I'm losing my word, but divisiveness. Um and so it really feels like these kids not only are doing what we think is impossible slash extraordinary, but they're doing it in such a pure way that I
Mhm.
think is inspiring and that we could all really learn from. And I'm not just saying that, like we could really pay attention to what they're doing and actually emulate that and learn from it and be good and inspired in our own way. And of course, people are hearing about the hill more and more. And so they're wondering, are our speakers, like people like us who would be interested in visiting the hill, like, are we going to try to get in there? Would we be allowed? And they're saying, like, yeah, if you're a non-speaker, you can come in, but you have to be really pure of heart. You're not going to be able to get in if you're not really pure of heart.
I definitely want to
Cool,
know more.
right? That's so cool.
and
Talk about like a good bouncer
I,
system.
and I have a couple stories for you from when I was working with that community prior to what I do now. So
Okay, I'm really excited. So that I think that's what we'll do on Monday, March 17th. Oh, St. Patrick's Day. Cool. All right, a little extra magic in the air. So I imagine you're not going to be going out and drinking green beer. I'm definitely
no,
not.
definitely not.
Okay.
I'm
All right.
I'm not a fan of St. Patrick's Day, so definitely not.
Well, I'm 1/8 Irish, so I do love it, but I'm just gonna wear something green. My eyes are green, so nobody can ever pinch me. I've got the loophole. All right, Aaron, let the good people know how to work with you, and then I'll do the same, and then we will log off.
Um, you can reach me on IG, peace, the number four healers. And you can email me at peace, the number four healers at gmail.com. I have a great special right now for personal development and coaching. It's only $200 for 4 sessions, 4 1 hour sessions to work on just about anything you want to work on. It includes a, a reading or anything that you may want to learn or even just have someone to talk about with. Because a lot of us find there's no one to talk about certain things with without being judged or looked at as if you're crazy. So that's the great offering that's available right now. And today is March 3rd,
3-3. Yeah.
3 3. Time to develop those things that are waiting to be developed.
Yeah. Pastime. Let's do it. Okay, and then if you want to have a one-on-one hypnosis session with me, just go to CourtneyStarkey.com. If you want to get trained in soul empowering hypnosis to become a practitioner, again, go to CourtneyStarkey.com. And if you want to join the group hypnosis membership, we actually have a group hypnosis session coming up in just a few days. You can also go to CourtneyStarkey.com and find all of those resources. I did reference my book earlier today. That's another thing that you can get whenever you go to my website. And yeah, all things hypnosis are there, whether you want to have a one-on-one session, get trained how to do this, have a group experience, or read a really, really good book. All right, CourtneyStarkey.com. And Aaron, that was fun. Next week, we're
That's
going to
wonderful.
be March 14th, so it's not going to be on the 10th. It's not going to be Monday, and we will have Kelsey Cannon, which is going to be awesome. Yeah, you're going to love it.
It's going to be
All
fun.
right. Okay, everybody, thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you in just